then obviously that's going to change some other things in this analysis. Let's take a look and see what would happen if we place the 40-week trough over here. Then we would alleviate this situation. This situation over here is a very short, we'll measure it in a moment, it's 90-something days. It's a very short 20-week cycle. So the 20-week cycle would probably then also extend longer. So we would relieve this situation here where you can see these cycles are getting very, very crowded. Okay? So, yes, it's a very viable possibility that we could place the 40-week trough over here. Now, of course, if you're doing this manually, you'd have to perform a whole new analysis. But with Sentient Trader, fortunately, it is very, very easy to do. And you do that by creating what's called an expert model. Our beta testers used to say to me, you shouldn't call it an expert model because it'll frighten away people who aren't experts. But the name has stuck. It's called an expert model. You don't by any means need to be an expert to implement it. It's very easy to do, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how to do that. I see we have a question. 2 questions, so let me answer those before we move on with it. From, I think that's Marcel, is it? You can also use moving average to show the cycles in play, that is 90-day, 45-day, and just adjust to get the cycle that fits. You can see skips that way, which are usually other longer cycles, then you get the cycle pattern of 303. Yes, that's an interesting subject. Myself plotting moving averages and calculating moving average differences. I have some fairly strong opinions about it. It will make a subject for a really interesting discussion. You need to be careful of what I call mathematical conjuring when it comes to moving average displacements and moving averages, but it's a whole separate subject. But in Sentient Trader, in fact, you can plot 3 moving averages. Of course, the triad, which are related to Hurst's half-span moving average. They are, in fact, a half-span, a 2/3, and a 1/3 span moving average. And you can use information from these to inform your analysis as well. That's a subject for a whole other day. I think let me not get distracted. But that is a very interesting point and something that I have to make a note of. I think it's something we must pick up in a future trader chat when we have some more time. Jose, sorry David, following same reasoning over SP, we can position last 18-month cycle on August 2010 instead of July 2010. Do you like that scenario? It would mean next 18-month low for spring 2012. For the S&P 500, yes, let's take a look at it a little later if we have time, and see whether and see what the S&P is looking at. Off the top of my head, I'm a graphic visual person. I need to see it visually. So let's take a look at that a little later, Jose, and see. How do you use double bottoms or tops to project the end of a cycle? Do you use first split time or last? Okay. That depends. When you're talking about Marcel, whether I think you're talking about when you have a double bottom. This is not a very good example, but here's just a very rough double bottom, and I think you're asking. Here's a rough double bottom, okay, and you're asking, do we take the first trough, or the second trough, or the split trough? The answer to that question is not as simple as do you take the first, second, or split. The answer is it could be either one of them. This one would be considered a straddled trough. That would be a straddled trough if it happened over there. And whether you use the first or the second one depends on how long the cycles are and how your analysis breaks down into shorter cycles. Perhaps I should explain the really interesting thing about Hurst cyclic analysis is Marcel's asking, how would you resolve the position of, for instance, the 40-week cycle? You know, should we put it here or here or here? It's not a perfect example, but it's good enough to be going with. Would you position the cycle trough at which one of these three would you position it? The answer to that question comes in how the shorter cycles break down, how they play out. So let me just turn that off. And so how do the shorter cycles break down? Let me turn on my pen again. The important thing about Hurst cyclic analysis is when you find one trough, you don't confirm it. So here we're thinking this could be a trough or that a trough of the 40-week cycle. How do we know which one it is? You look at how the 20-week cycle breaks down. You look at how the 80-day cycle breaks down, how the 40-day cycle breaks down, how the 20-day cycle breaks down. Okay, you go all the way down, right down to the bottom, all the way down to 5 days. And the answer to your question is provided in seeing how all of those cycles break down as you go shorter and shorter and shorter. Sentient Trader actually considers all three options, and it has a look and it rates the cyclic models that it builds, and it finds the best option in terms of how the shorter cycles break down. It's a very complicated and time-consuming process to do yourself, to do manually. It's a fascinating process, I find, for somebody who likes solving puzzles. It's a mathematically fascinating and intriguing process, but it's a very time-consuming process. Sentient Trader does it all for you, and it resolves those kinds of issues. So there's no simple first trough or split trough or second trough. And so I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure whether that's Marcel or Marshall, but I hope that answers your question in terms of which trough it is. Okay, the answer has to do with the way in which one performs her cyclic analysis, which is an endless topic. I can speak for weeks about it. So I hope that answers your question in the meantime. And let me move on and talk about how we can change the analysis that Sentient Trader has performed. Let me zoom out again and just sort of recap in terms of where we are. Took a little bit of a diversion with some questions, so let me just recap and turn off the FLDs. You'll see that the current analysis states that the 40-week cycle is occurring over here, and I want to have a look at what might happen if that cycle was to occur over here. Okay. And the way that you do it is you build something called an expert model. Don't be daunted by the fact that it's called an expert model, because it is not in fact daunting. It is really very easy. You go to the analysis menu, you go to expert, and you go create new model. Now, it's very important. The Sentient Trader pops up some defaults that are very, very important to you in order to get Sentient Trader to adapt an expert model. The analysis that Sentient Trader performs is extremely complicated. I love talking about it. It's a mathematical puzzle. I've already mentioned today. It's a very complex process. Sentient Trader uses a pattern recognition approach. It doesn't use a purely mathematical moving average approach. It uses a pattern recognition approach, which is streets ahead of any purely mathematical approach. It performs a form of spectral analysis, which consists of the first 5% of the analysis work. Because spectral analysis is not a dynamic process. Sentient Trader mimics what humans do when they analyze a market using cyclic principles. It analyzes a human approach, and it's a very exciting analysis process. But because it is such a complex and exciting analysis process, it is very complex getting it to change its analysis. You can't simply say, oh, move that trough over there, because Sentient Trader's positioned that trough because of the breakdown of all the cycles going all the way down to the 5-day cycle level. Now, you can't see all that detail just looking at the graph, but believe me, Sentient Trader knows all that detail. It has found a trough for every single one of these 5-day cycles. And if you just say, oh, just move this trough over by 5 days, then of course it's got to re-perform all those calculations, and it's going to come up with a model that is less satisfactory. You should know Sentient Trader has looked at every possible combination of results, and for various reasons it has rejected the analysis. Sometimes a poorer analysis actually turns out to be correct. The markets are not perfect, as everybody knows. That's what makes them so fascinating. They're not perfect, and sometimes, ironically, a poorer analysis ends up being the one that is true. Interacting with the analysis that Sentient Trader performs is a process where what you do is you tell Sentient Trader where you would like to position the troughs. Now, the defaults that Sentient Trader pops up. It puts in here the longest cycle, which in this case is the 18-month cycle. That's not arbitrary. That's very important, and I would recommend that you don't change it. Most people who have a difficult time getting Sentient Trader to accept their expert models, most of the time it happens because they've changed this longer cycle. The reason Sentient Trader has that as a longer cycle is because in the analysis period called phasing analysis entry, Sentient Trader is working with the 18-month cycle. That's why it puts it over there as the longest cycle. So you must always have the longer cycle as at least the cycle it suggests, if not longer. And the model resolution, you can go down to any level you like. We could just go down to the 40-week cycle, but it's always better to go down one level of resolution because of resolving inverted cycle shapes. Something you don't need to worry about, but certainly when you get started building expert models, I recommend you go with the defaults. You can inherit models from other models so that you can apply them to different stocks. You can apply the Euro-US dollar model to any other price data you like. You could apply it to to the Euro British Pound or whatever, and see what it does and enhance your analysis in that way. But let's not get complicated. You're asked whether you would like to create a separate model at each resolution. You don't want to. You could do, but it gets complicated. Let's not bother with that. And you're asked if all trough ranges should be limited to the maximum resolution. Our maximum resolution, as you can see here, model resolution is 20 weeks. So I normally say yes because it creates neater and tidier models. Then we click on OK, and it asks you to provide a name, which is the name that you will later use to refer to this model. I'm going to call this Euro-US dollar trader chat expert model. Okay, click on the OK button. Sentient Trader then presents you with the same amount of data, but in a different type of chart. And you'll see that there are three levels up at the top here. I don't know whether you see it. Let me turn on my whiteboard and just sort of highlight these things. There are three zones in this chart divided by thin horizontal lines. The upper zone is this sort of zone over here, and that is the 18-month cycle. And then there's the mid zone, which is this zone over here. Sorry, sort of extending all the way across the chart, and that's the 40-week cycle zone. And at the bottom here, you can see there's a 20-week cycle zone, and that's this zone over here. All right. What are you doing? What are we doing with this? What is this? It's a chart, but it's a little bit different. It's got the three zones. What are we doing here? We are telling Sentient Trader where we would like to, in our opinion, position the troughs of these three cycles. Wow, so does that look daunting? Do I really have to position every single one of these 18-month troughs? No, you don't. In fact, all we really need to do is position one of them. So let's go back to our chart and come back here and see on what date this 18-month cycle trough occurred on the 7th of June 2010.